Coach David Buchanan. Coach Chuck Smith. Two legendary high school football coaches. This is the Coach's Office, a behind-the-scenes look at Kentucky high school football.
All right, welcome to the Coach's Office Behind the Scenes with Chuck Smith and David Buchanan. This is off-season episode 1. So this is our kickoff episode for our off-season program, off-season number 3. I'm Chuck Smith. I'm joined by co-host David Buchanan, podcast editor / storyteller Mike Yoakum. Our YouTube version of this podcast is at TCOP, T.C.O.P. And if you get on there and you hit like and subscribe, it helps us out. We also have some like 2 to 3 minute segments on there. So if you don't have a whole hour to watch, you can just, tap into one of those 2 or 3 minute segments, and you'll get a lot out of it. It's coaches answering some of the questions that we ask them. We're kicking off our off season with a bang. We got former University of West Virginia head football coach Neal Brown as our guest coach tonight. I couldn't be more proud and excited to have Neal on our show. He's one of my former players. And then we're also going to discuss some of the open jobs around the state. There's several open right now, and we'll discuss some of those, not all of them, but some. A little bit about Neal before we bring him on. Neal, as I said, he's a Boyle County graduate. I had the privilege and honor of coaching Neal in high school. He played his college football at the University of Kentucky and also at UMass. He's had many different coaching stops. He climbed the ladder pretty fast. He was at UMass. He was at Sacred Heart. He was at Delaware. He was at Troy. He was at Texas Tech. He was at Kentucky before later being hired back at Troy again as the head football coach. And he was hired probably 34, 35 years old. He became a head football coach, at Troy University. So he really climbed the ladder pretty fast. He did an outstanding job at Troy. I think he was 35-6 in his years there at Troy. Then he later becomes the head football coach at West Virginia University. So his overall record is 72-51. But listen to his bowl record. His bowl record is 5-1. That's pretty impressive now. I mean, he's going to give us some insight on how he's pulled that off. But that's pretty impressive. He was the Sun Belt Coach of the Year in 2017. Neal has experience with great success. We're really excited to have him on our show. David, you want to bring Neal on?
Hey, I do. Hey, real quickly, though, I also want to thank Kelly Wilkins with 5S Fundraising. Kelly's sponsoring this episode. At Anderson County, we were able to raise $20,000 this year, doubled what we had in the past. Our goal was $10,000. So I want to thank Kelly for his help and encourage anybody listening. You want to make some money to get ready for this coming season. This is Kelly's the guy to go with. But, hey, Coach Brown, hey, thank you so much. And I feel like I'm speaking for most of the high school guys in Kentucky, and we are all so proud of you. And not just the success that you've had and how well you've climbed the ladder, but always done with integrity and character and doing things the right way. So this is an honor for us. And, I've loved Boyle County High School since I was 4 years old. So this is really cool to have one of the greatest Rebels of all time on our show today. And, hey, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Coach, I appreciate it. I appreciate both of you. I need to have Coach Smith. I need to have David give me that intro to my kids. That's what I need my kids to hear because they think I'm lying. Anything I tell them about high school, they think I'm lying to them. So No, I appreciate both of you, and you all know this, and probably most of your listeners do. But I'm a product of educators, Kentucky educators. My dad was a former coach and a high school principal. He's still in the education business. He can't get out, and that's probably good to keep him busy. Mom was an elementary school librarian. Both or 3 out of my 4 grandparents were teachers. My dad's dad, my grandfather, was a very successful high school coach at Owensboro, and then was a principal and superintendent there. Both my wife's parents are teachers, so that's the education system and coaching in the state of Kentucky is really, I grew up with it. I'm very proud of that background.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
And then, before I ask you the first question, I was going to tell you, if you ask my dad what was one of the best decisions he ever made as a coach, it would be that he hired your father-in-law back in 1969 at Boyle County High School. My dad is a big Morris Allen Stewart fan, and we could get going on stories on your dad and your father-in-law and probably fill a whole show. But hey, so if it's okay, we got a lot we want to ask you. We did good to narrow it down to the 7 questions we've got. So I'm going to get you started here. Something I'd never heard of until Trosper went to UK. The middle 8, the last 4 minutes of the first half, and the first 4 minutes of the second half. Why is that time slot significant, and how should coaches approach that part of the game to help their team be successful?
Well, it's something that we obviously spend a lot of time on here, and I think let's start back about the why behind it first. Is the statistics show in college football. I can only speak of college football. In college football, the winner of the middle 8 gives you over an 80% chance of winning the football game. And if you look at it over, and I haven't looked at this year's data yet, but for several years in a row, Alabama and Clemson were 2 of the schools that were in the top 5 winning the middle 8. And of course, for a certain number of years, those 2 programs were at the top of college football. And so I think, like, from a situational standpoint, I'm a big believer in is you got to educate your players in situational football in the classroom and then during practice. And you got to do it in a way where you teach them what it is when it's the last 4 minutes of the first half, first 4 minutes of the second half. And then you got to explain why it's important, and you give them those statistics. Then you go out and practice, and you practice, and you allow them fail, and then you learn from failure on that. And basically what we did is from a middle 8 perspective, we practiced the 2-minute end to half and the first 4 minutes of the second half quite a bit. And what we did is we always had a situation at the end of the half. All right, well, you get the ball. So a lot of those times are sudden change. It could be a turnover. You get the ball back on a turnover. So you stop practice. And we had a sudden change period in practice. You sound the horn. You come out. And as the head coach, you walk out there and say, okay, guys, there's 1:10 left. All right. From a defense perspective, is the offense just threw an interception. And now they have the ball on the -40. All right. And your job from a defense perspective is you got to put out the fire. Your goal is to get off the field without allowing points before the half. The flip side of that now, offense, is the defense just got a takeaway. Now you've got the ball on the -41 with a chance to steal points before half. And there's a significant difference from an offense perspective between an end-to-half situation, a 2-minute end-to-half situation, and a 2-minute end-to-game situation. In the end-to-game situation, you need to know, first of all, tied. Are you behind? If you're behind, how many points? And in those situations, sometimes you're going to have to put the ball in jeopardy because you got to go make a play, in particular if you're behind. Well, in the half, I always talk to our quarterbacks about you're really playing with house money here. Okay, what we have to do first and foremost is take care of the football, and then let's go steal points going into the half. And that's what we practiced it. And then the flip side of that, when you're coming out of the halftime, what's it always start with? Some type of kick, right? So we would always come out of a break in practice, especially in fall camp or spring, and we would always start with out of the break, we would start with either a kickoff or a kickoff return, and then we would play that drive a lot. And so I think you just train your guys. But football is such a momentum game. And if you can steal the momentum going into half, and then you can maintain that momentum as you come out in the second half, that really sets you up for success as the game goes.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That's good. That is. And, it's funny looking back on 32 years, I can remember end of first half stuff, big wins, scoring at the end of the half. The flip side, huge losses, horrible losses, not getting it done. A drive ending on the 10 with no points, for example. So it's fascinating. Hey, that was great. That's going to be really good for our listeners. Hey, Chuck, I'll be quiet and let you get the next one.
Yeah, and we'll kind of skip around here a little bit, Neal, with the the content of the question. But you were a 3-sport star, and you need to tell your kids, let your kids listen to this part, because you were a legit 3-sport star in high school. You played football, basketball, and baseball, but you also spent your career recruiting, high school kids to play football for you. So what are your thoughts on, kids specializing, in the sport? When you were recruiting, did you want a kid that was a kid that specialized in just, football, or did you want, a kid that played multiple sports? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I want to answer this in a 3-part way. Okay. So the first one is from my personal experience. Okay. And from my personal experience, like, I wouldn't trade it for the world, what I was able to accomplish. And what I mean by that is being able to play 3 sports, no accolades or anything like that. Like, I wouldn't trade it. I absolutely loved it. I love sports. And you both know this, but I grew up, and my dad was either coaching baseball or football, and my uncle was a basketball coach. And so depending on what time of the year it is, I was either in a full field house in football, I was in the gym for basketball, or I was in a dugout for baseball. And that's how I grew up. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. And I was able to do those 3 sports from the time I was probably 4 or 5 years old all the way through my high school career. And I wouldn't trade that. Some of the most special memories I have is we won the region at Boyle County in basketball for the first time ever, and going to play in Rupp Arena. We were fortunate enough to win the baseball region twice, and we played in the state baseball tournament. And so those are really special. And I look back at that, and being able to play 3 sports, it takes up a ton of time, but that's all I knew, and I wouldn't trade it. And so the second part of that is I attack it from a parent perspective, because I'm going through it right now. I've got a junior in high school. I've got an 8th grader, and I've got a 3rd grader. And starting my son, who's in 3rd grade, he plays 3 sports. And I hope he does. I hope he maintains it for a long time. And my goal as a parent is, regardless of where we live or what type of youth or travel sports he's involved in, as long as he wants to do that, is to make it possible. And I've got an 8th grade daughter who plays middle school basketball, middle school softball, and she plays soccer, and she plays travel soccer and travel softball, and she should play all 3 of those at the high school level. And again, my goal as a parent is to continue to give her opportunities to do that, because I think it's really, really important from a developmental standpoint. And I think there's no replacement for competition reps. And that leads me into the third perspective I look at it, and that's from a recruiting. And from a football perspective, is this the way we always looked at it. If we had player A and player B, and they were equal, and player A had played football and football only for his entire high school career, and player B maybe ran track, maybe played basketball, well, what that told me is, man, there's a lot more development probably happening in player B. I'm going player B. And the other thing I'll say from a recruiting standpoint is just the opportunity to evaluate. A lot of the times in recruiting, what you're trying to figure out is where's the lowest amount of risk. And if you go and you get live evaluations, let's say if you're recruiting a receiver or a tight end, well, you may go watch them play football and you go to a game. Well, depending on what happens, maybe the quarterback's struggling, maybe he's injured, maybe it's wet, the quarterback or the receiver or the tight end, they might not touch the ball much. They may get 3 or 4 targets, and it's really hard to evaluate what their level is if they're not getting the ball. And that's not the high school coach's fault. They're trying to win the game. Well, let's say that skill player, that offensive skill player, he goes plays basketball. Well, there's all kinds of movement skills in basketball, all right, that show or project into football. Do they have body control? What's their quickness look like? Can they get off the ground? And I'm talking about physical tools, not this competitive stuff.
Right.
And so I'm a huge believer in the opportunity to evaluate and minimize risk. If a guy plays more than one sport, man, then you're lowering your risk on missing on that player. And nothing probably irritates me more during the process when, whether it's a coach or a kid or the parent says, "Oh, listen, guys, he's not going to play basketball this year. We're just going to put him in the weight room."
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, man, like, why? You got a finite amount of time for you go to play high school basketball. And man, those are some huge, like I remember winning the regional championship in McCurry Central in Stearns, Kentucky. And that place was packed and they were right behind our bench. And let me tell you something, that prepares you. You go play in a gym that's full of 3,000 people and it's tight. Well, guess what? It's the same as playing in Death Valley. They're just 100 more of them there, but they're not any louder. And so I think too is like and I'll say this again, there's no replacement for competition. And you cannot tell me that a student athlete is not better served by going and playing in stressful, intense competitions in basketball or having to go in one-on-one competition and wrestling or in track and field. You can't tell me they're not getting more out of that experience. In the weight room, I'm a believer in. But you can't tell me they're getting more because you can do both.
Yeah.
You can do both.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me that they're getting the same amount of preparation just in the weight room. I just don't think that exists. So I'm a huge component. I wouldn't take my personal experience back. I loved it. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do that. I hope my kids play multiple sports. And if I'm recruiting, like I'm strongly drawn to people that play multiple sports.
Yeah, and the way kids or the way the schools are set up now, where they're just about all of them can lift weights during the school day. There's really nothing holding you back from playing multiple sports if that's what you want to do. Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing: it's an adult problem. It's not a kid problem.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what we've got to. Like there's major problems. Like all your kids are old enough now or they're past, but youth sports, there's a ton of positives to it, but there's a ton of negatives to it. And the adults got to get along and they got to make it work. And when you get to the high school level, it's about win. You got to win, but you also can't lose fact that you're in the developmental phase of young people. 14 to 18 is a huge developmental phase. And the adults got to get along, and the administration at school levels got to be involved and make sure that players or students that are playing multiple sports, girls and boys, are given that opportunity, and the adults aren't getting in the way of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I just hope the youth sports can hang in there and continue to be developmental, and that's a struggle right now. Hey, next question.
Let me give you an example of this too, because I think this is good for the high school coach to see it from a college perspective. All right, we had a player at West Virginia. He'll be a junior next fall, but it's a kid named Rodney Gallagher. All right, Rodney Gallagher was a dual sport, played basketball growing up. He was actually on Bronny's AAU team, and then as he went through high school, it became evident that his best sport was going to be football. He played quarterback, but he was an athlete. And here he's from Uniontown, which is down the road from Morgantown, but they played in the Whippeal. The Whippeal is Western Pennsylvania. Anyway, so in basketball, you go and you play in your division, you make it to the Whippeal finals. Well, they play the Whippeal basketball finals at Pitt's gym. Well, he goes up there and he plays point guard, handles the ball the whole time. I think there's a lot to be said when you watch somebody play basketball because they're not wearing a helmet. The crowd's right on top of them, so you understand how they handle their body language, all that kind of stuff. It's a lot easier to see in basketball than it's football. Well, the short story of this, he goes up and hits 2 free throws with under 1 second to go to win the WPIAL championship. Well, in my mind, he's sitting in a gym probably with 8 or 10,000 people in there. All eyes are on him. He goes up, calm, boom, 1, 2. They win the WPIAL. Well, in my mind, as a football coach, I'm like, well, that kid can play as a freshman because it ain't going to be too big for him.
Yeah.
Because you got 22 players on football, you can hide a little bit sometimes. In basketball, you shooting a free throw. You know what I mean? You shooting free throws.
Yeah.
Everybody's – and so, like, that's an example that I would use because I remember coming back to our staff and going, listen, guys, I watched this last night on the live feed. There's no question that kid can play for us as a freshman. So let's start making plans for that. So anyway, carry on. Cool. I just wanted to – I feel strongly about that.
I like that. Harry Lewis one night hit 8 out of 8 free throws to get to the region tournament. And I've always been very proud of that. And I agree with what you're talking about. Hey, if you would, describe the influence of Mike Leach that he had on you in terms of both your offense, but also your approach to leading a football team.
I think so. Coach Leach was my freshman year receiver coach. And then I had a relationship with him all through his life. And I think the main thing that sticks out to me about Coach Leach was 2 things I learned. And I probably didn't really understand I was learning this when he was coaching me and as our relationship. But as I reflect on that, as you sent me that question and it gave me a time to kind of ponder on it, 2 things. Number one, it's okay to be different. It's okay to do it in the best way that you see fit and not trying to be somebody else. The second thing is, man, he asked a ton of questions and just the power of being curious. And I can remember that. We would be in a meeting, something would come up. I can remember him asking me tons of questions about horse racing. And because my grandparents go to the races. I can remember them taking me to every horse park from Ellis Park to Turfway in the state of Kentucky. My dad's mom was tight. She was cheap, but she would bet horses. And so like some really fond memories of me growing up are going to the horse track with them. And so I knew that. Now I've got way too much stuff going on now. I don't know it like I did then. But I remember him just asking me questions about it because it was all new to him. He was in Kentucky for the first time. He was learning about it. And the horse racing sticks out to me because that's questions he was asking me, but he was asking questions constantly. And those are the real takeaways from him is just, it's okay to be yourself. There's different ways to accomplish the same goal. And then just the curiosity. But I think it's important too. And I was thinking about this, from a coaching influence, I appreciated Coach Leach, but really from a football coaching influences, mine are 4 people, and one of them's on this call, Chuck Smith, and really he taught me how to do hard things. He can tell you when I went to Boyle County, football was 3 out of 3 for me, and I thought I was going to be a basketball guy, and quit growing, so that kind of went away. But he taught me how to do. He and Chris Pardue taught me how to do hard things better, and that really set me up for everything that I've done since. And did a great job of really teaching motivation, how to get young people motivated to do something really hard and do it in a team manner. And then the second one for me was Tony Franklin, and he was probably had the most influence on me from an offense perspective, is because he really took the time early on when I was a player and then early in my coaching career to teach me the why. All right, why are we doing this? Because I would ask sometimes, and you get this, some people would say, well, that's because that's why we're doing it. He would really explain to me the why, and he gave me some really good opportunities early in my career. The third one is Larry Blakeney, who just got inducted or just got found out he was getting put into the College Football Hall of Fame, and his was all about, man, he treated the players, and I can remember being an assistant coach under him. And him saying, hey, I can go out and find anybody to do your job. I can't go find somebody to score touchdowns. It's hard to do that. I'm sitting there and I can remember that and going, well, I don't know about all that. But then the older I got, I'm like, yeah, you can find a lot of people coach. the elite players are really, really hard. And then the fourth for me was Mark Stoops, because when I came to Kentucky in the fall of 2012 as an offensive coordinator, my coaching career, a little bit at Texas Tech, but for the most part, it had been we'd been successful, and I don't think you're really tested until you're not very successful. We went there, and Coach Smith knows this. Like in December of 12, like we went in 2012 at Texas Tech. We went from having one of the top 2 or 3 offenses in the country, and then I remember going up and going to Lexington for the first time. And my wife, Brooke, and our 2 kids at the time were back in Lubbock. And I stayed at my parents' house in Danville and drove up to Lexington the first day. And the GA and I, Tyler Sargent, who Coach Smith knows as well, we watched the guys that were returning. And I remember calling Brooke about lunchtime and going, "Oof, I don't know about this." I know you said you wanted to come back, but it's gonna be rough here. And but what I learned from him is where he would work for Jimbo and Jimbo would work for Saban is just the structure of the program. And I thought I was ready to be a head coach, but I really never failed in coaching. And so we had to work and get through some lack of talent, some other things like that, and resources at that time. And there was some failure involved, but I also learned some structure. And so, which was really important for me at that time and really set me up for that success that we had at Troy as a head coach.
Hey, that's a good answer. Hey, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Neal, my next question for you is just kind of an offensive question. It's being an offensive guy like you are, if you were going into the game and you knew you couldn't win in the trenches from an offensive perspective, what would your game plan be, and how would you attack that defense to give your kids the best chance to win?
Yeah, so there's really 2 thought processes on this, and I think it goes back to who your quarterback is first. And so early in my career, if you would have asked me this, I would have said, because we really made our living throwing the football there, and that was the differentiator for us, is throwing the football. So I would have said, man, we want to play basketball on grass. We want to spread people out. We want to get the ball out of our hand fast, and those are either in quick screens, or screens to your running back, or jailbreak screens, or we want to move the pocket and give our offensive line a better opportunity to protect, or we just want to be able to catch the ball and throw it. A lot of quick game stuff. And if you have a passing quarterback and you have really good skill players, I think that's still a good answer. Now, as I've kind of aged through this and probably matured, I think, and the game's different, is now I look at it, and this is kind of who we've been the last 2 years and we've been successful offensively, is it's kind of this new age, what I call new age option football, and really wanting to split the defense. And the best way I can say this is, okay, so it's a numbers game. This is going to be really simplistic, but on defense, you have 11 guys, and everybody on defense, all 11 of them can tackle. Right? On offense is you only got 9 blockers. So you got the quarterback who can't block, and you got the guys carrying the ball who can't block. So you're playing 9 on 11 all the time. All right. Well, how do you even up the numbers offensively, and then how do you create conflict? And so the answer for me now at this point in my career is you've got to be able to split the defense, and there's different ways to split the defense. So you can have a run play with a perimeter screen, and so the defense has to defend the run play and the perimeter screen. You can have a run play with some kind of quick game pass, what everybody's calling an RPO. Some of them are run, pass, run, but where you have a run play with some kind of quick game concept. And so the defense has to play both the pass and the run. Or you can have a movement pass with some kind of power run, some kind of gap run, where, again, you've got an option to throw the ball or you got an option to run it inside. Defense has to play both. Or you can have read game. And what I mean by that is you can have, and if you watched the Eagles, they did this quite a bit in their divisional round win this past weekend. As we filmed this past weekend, when they beat who they beat. I forget. Anyway, the Eagles did it. Jalen Hurts hit a touchdown. And on this, and what they did is they ran GT counter to the left with the running back. Or excuse me, they ran GT counter to the left with the quarterback, and they brought their back to the right. And so, and if we're looking here, is he sit there, the quarterback read it, the end got up the field, took away the running back, he ran the GT power, and he was out. Okay, and so that's option football, but you're splitting the defense. So you've got an outside perimeter run, and then you've got an interior run. And what that does is you're reading the defender. So now that's one defender you're reading. So now it's 9 on 10. And then what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the free hitter as far away from you as you can. And so in dealing with most high school football coaches, very few people have the ability to have a quarterback that, man, can just get the ball out, make good decisions, and have enough skill players where you can beat them throwing the football. Some do, but most don't. So I think the answer now and the way the game's played now is how can you play option football and give where the defense, you're putting people in conflict, and the defense has to play, all right, different plays within the same play. The other thing I think, too, with the run game is if you're playing a severe matchup issue, is you've got to make any type of your shot plays, what I call run action pass. So if you're going to run some kind of a 11 or 12 personnel, whether it's inside zone, whether it's counter, outside zone, you need to have some kind of shot, either 2-man or 3-man concept that looks just like the run play. And you've got to be okay understanding that your protection may not be as sound as you would like it to be, but you have an opportunity to hit a home run. And you've got to be able to take calculated risks, especially if you're an underdog or especially if you're a team that can't block as well. You've got to take a calculated risk and saying, okay, hey, they're going to play the run. All we got to do is make the pass play look just like the run, and then we got a chance at a one-on-one down the field. And so I think either or, you play the pass game, or in the run game is you give your quarterback some options where you've got different plays built into the same concept.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. That's a really good answer, but it's really good stuff. And I don't know how the defenses stop the offenses anymore. That's why these scores are so outrageous in games because, I mean, they just got it going on, really.
Well, the thing that you have to do in today's football, to me, is defensively. And you've forgotten more defensive football than I know, but you've got to be able to shed blocks, and you've got to be able to you don't always have to make the play to make the tackle in space, but you got to be able to slow them down. Yeah. And that, I think, one of the biggest conflicts in football, whether it's at high school or college level now, is man, how do you practice tackling and do it in a safe way? Yeah. Because this is a contact game, so you've got to practice contact. And then you've got to, like the way the game's played on offense now from a defense perspective, it's more important now than ever to be able to make one-on-one tackles.
Yeah.
And so how do you practice that and do it in a way that's safe?
Well, you got to get off blocks and make plays. That's the way it's always going to be. But you're going to have to be aggressive defensively too, because of all of the different things the offenses can do with the RPOs or the double plays. Reading the play and running 2 plays in one, really.
Yeah.
And I tell you what else. If they don't get a handle on ineligible receivers downfield with the offensive linemen, I mean, it's just going to get worse and worse because, I mean, that's basically a lot of times that rule doesn't even exist anymore. The reality of it is.
Yeah. And you got to, from a defense perspective too, is what I would tell listeners is they've got to make a decision and they've got to mix it up in the game how you're going to play the mesh. So if I'm the read defender, whether they're reading a 3 technique, whether they're reading an end, whatever it is you cannot play it the same way every time. And you got to remember you're playing the quarterback, not the other coach. Yeah. And so, you've got to play, you've got to give it a give read, how are you going to play it? You got to give a pull read, and then you got a mesh charge. And you've got to mix those up within a game where you're not just playing on your heels all the time.
Right.
That's good. Well, hey, next question for you. Your bowl record was 5-1. What strategies did you follow to have that type of success in the postseason?
Well, I think most of them is because our players made plays. I don't know if it was anything that we were doing coaching perspective wise. I will say this: I think more people are doing this now, but it was always important to us to make it a fun, rewarding experience. And I always talk to our guys about 4 goals. First goal is to win the game. We're playing the game. We're playing to win. The second one is we want to have an enjoyable experience. And we wanted to try to give them as many gifts or experiences. Part of that enjoyable experiences is you practice lighter. And one thing that we did is, man, I'd put the practice, I'd show them the practice beforehand, and we wouldn't stop the clock at all. And so we always would stagger our practice. We would have everybody that's going to play in the game. And I tried to keep it between an hour and 15 minutes. And, man, I would keep a running clock, and we didn't stop it. And the minute that thing hit, we were getting them out. And then we would keep our younger players in scrimmage. And so and we didn't do with the younger players, it was scrimmage. And we tried to make it competitive and keep score during our bowl prep. But anyway, we wanted to win, have fun, enjoyable experience. Third thing is we wanted to honor our seniors. And so what we tried to do is we really made it a point. We would pick a senior or maybe 2, depending on time, and we would try to honor those each day. And then we would really do something the night before to really honor those guys that were leaving the program. And the last thing was just we would constantly talk about how this was prep for next year, for the next season, and how we could use this as a springboard. And we would always try to figure out ways to get some guys we thought were going to be maybe they played a minimal role or an average role during the season. How could we put them in a role that really where they felt like it was going to catapult them into next year? And so that's what we talked about. We had 4 goals, and I would put those goals in front of them every single day. Every day before we practice in our team meeting, I'd say, hey, guys, goal number 1 is to win. Number 2, we want to have an enjoyable experience. Third is we're going to honor our seniors. Fourth is we're getting ready for the next year. And so we did that, and we didn't beat them up. We didn't over-practice. We were always fresh in those games, regardless if we were playing 2 weeks after the regular season or 5. And we gave them downtime too. I think that's important. You got to give them some time to go home and be away a little bit. I think those are the reasons why we were successful.
It's a good answer.
We could have played for him, couldn't we, David?
No, that sounds pretty good. That sounds better than full gear at 105 with Coach French.
Hey, Neal, my last question for you is, if you choose to be a head football coach again, is there anything you would do differently? What would be your non-negotiables?
Yeah, I would. Well, first of all, I want to, and I believe I will be a head football coach again. And I'll say that I'm enjoying this. I'm calling it kind of sabbatical. I'm enjoying this. I don't think anybody wants to get fired, but I haven't. It's been a good learning experience for me. As I look back at our time at West Virginia, I really think time will be a friend to that. There's some things that we didn't do good enough, but there's also some things we did really well. And a lot of times here, we were able to maybe outperform our resources. And so, but as I look back, I think there's some things that, let me say this, some things I'm really proud of that we did here is I think the infrastructure is really good. And I'm talking about a bricks and mortar and just the infrastructure of the program and all the things that go into being a high-level Power 4 program. I think we established those. Our processes were really good. Our organization, all those things were really good. As I look back, and and I would encourage people to do this that are in between jobs, as I go back and I really kind of go through the entire 6-year tenure at West Virginia, is what I've done in the previous weeks is said, okay, what have we done? What did we do well? What do we need to sustain at the next stop? And where do we need to improve? And I think about that offense, defense, special teams. I think about that from all the different, whether it's recruiting, scouting, strength conditioning, nutrition, etc. Then I think about it from a people perspective too. And really the biggest thing is where we got to the last 2 years is should have done things earlier, and the entire tenure would have been different. We should have created an identity. Talking about offense a little bit, the last 2 years we've been a running football team, and 2 years ago we were the number one ranked Power 4 running football team in the country. This year we were in the top 15, I believe, and we did that with a dual threat quarterback. On special teams, the last 2 years we really established who we wanted to be. Defensively we didn't play well enough. And that's part of the reason that I'm on here with you guys rather than out recruiting today is we just didn't play very well on defense. And then the evaluation process is, to me, when you think about evaluation, there's a physical component, there's a mental component, and there's a character component. And I thought that later in my tenure here, we did a better job of evaluating all three, where we made some mistakes, either from a character or mental, physical, made some mistakes earlier. And the processes we're using at the end, I wish we would have used earlier. Some of the org structure stuff, like I thought in the last 2 years, we went to a general manager model with a scouting department, a recruiting, those are things. And we were still a little bit ahead of the curve, but man, if we did it maybe 18 months earlier, we'd have been even further down the road than we were. And then just some delegation, like the last 2 years, I really went to this philosophy of doing, from a head football coaching perspective, do what I do best and then delegate to experts in other fields. Where early here, I probably tried to have my hands in too many things. And so I think, the tenure would have been a little bit different if I would have hired experts or delegated to those experts at a better rate earlier. And so that's what I've been kind of is some of the stuff that we got to the last 2 years. I really felt like if we would have done it earlier, then we would have been more successful over a course of a 6 year. Like things happened this year. We were 6-6. We lost some close games. We had some injuries. Those are going to happen. But if we had done some of the things I just mentioned earlier, we'd have been able to withstand a 6-6 year. So hope that answered you.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's good to step back and kind of like what you're doing. You don't like how you got there, but you step back and take a look at what you've done and what you think you could do differently. I think that helps sometimes.
Yeah,
I really do.
I couldn't agree more. You get over the public.
Yeah.
The publicness of getting fired and the failure piece of it, but there's a lot of good in that too.
There is,
and you learn from things, and like I said, that's why I wouldn't trade this time. This time that I have to reflect, the time that I promise you, I'm a lot healthier now than I probably was 6 months ago, and it gives you some time. The next time you get the opportunity, you're going to do it better.
Right.
And so, I'm looking forward to it.
Hey, so Neal, I've got the last question for you. With NIL and transfer portal, and Chuck's done a really good job of having college coaches talk about this when they come on, and we've heard a lot of successful coaches comment on how different the dynamics are of coaching college football now. Going forward, can a transformational approach work? Which I've heard Coach Saban talk about, which is empowering, helping others. Will that still work as a big-time college football coach, or have we reached a point that it's going to be a transactional model, meaning we're going to use people, we're going to discard them, and that's going to be the model of a successful football coach at the collegiate level, at the highest levels going forward? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I think the first thing is we got to change perspective, right? And so just like offense, defense philosophies have changed over the course of the last 50 years or so, I think we have to change what the expectations are, what we think the role of a head football coach is. And if we're constantly stuck in this, well, this is the way it used to be, we're never going to move forward because things aren't going back. Now, hopefully we get some more organization and there's more structure within the model we have right now, but things aren't going back to what they used to be. So I think as coaches, as collegiate, especially college, at the Power 4 level, head football coaches, we're doing ourselves a major injustice because there's a lot of complaining, and people don't want to hear people that are making $34, $5, $10 million a year complain. That's just, it's like, hey, buddy, figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And so I think and I'm talking about my fellow coaches at at the Power 4 level, we've got to quit complaining about it, understand, and figure out ways to make it work. This is the way I think about it. So in today's day and age is we got three aspects. We got recruiting, we got development, and we got retention. And so recruiting is still about relationships, because we're in a professional model in a lot of ways, but in professional sports, you draft, and then you have contract rights to those guys you draft. That's not the way it's working at this level now. What happens is you're going to go out and recruit, meaning they have to choose you. And so to do that, relationships is still a big part of it. The development piece is coaching. And so all the ways that guys have motivated, the guys have taught, the guys have coached, those really aren't that much different. The only thing that's different is everything's public now. You got to think about every time that you're in front of a team, every time you have a one-on-one conversation, every time you're coaching in practice, you got to think that something's getting videoed or somebody's taking a picture. That's just, you got to work in that realm. But coaching, other than that, there's not a whole lot of difference. And the third piece is retention. Well, retention to me is a combination of recruiting and development, because the retention piece it's relationships. They got to feel like they're getting coached and getting better, from an individual basis and within their scheme and being productive. But then the retention piece that's different is the business side of it, which is financial. So to me, it's a mixture of both. You're not going to have just a transformational coach that doesn't embrace the business aspect of current college football. And you're not going to have success with a straight transactional guy that just looks at it as player A, B, and C, and it's all about finances. It's those that can kind of be a combination of both. Those are the ones that are going to have success in this day and age. It's going to be people that can adapt, either adapt or die. In this role is there's going to continue to be rule changes. There's going to be it's going to be changes. I think it's going to happen for the next 3 to 5 years before things really settle down. And so you got to be able to adapt. You've got to be really relational and understanding and getting to know your players, because you got to get to know not only for what buttons to push on the field, but who is helping them with their off the field decisions. The only way you get to know that is to listen. And the only time you're going to listen and get knowledge is you got to invest time in those guys. And then you got to continue to coach them at a high level. So you got to continue to be an expert in your field, offense, defense, special teams, whatever the player's playing. And the third thing is you got to have really good checks and balances in how you're going to pay your players. And so I don't think that it's one or the other. You're not going to be transformational or transactional. It's going to be a combination of both to be successful in this current climate.
That's a great answer.
Excellent answer. Hey, Neal, I got a question.
Yeah.
Just to follow up. There's,
Yep.
but your answer was great. But how, what would a recruiting meeting look like nowadays? When you sit down at the table, are you saying, hey, so many scholarships are going to high school kids, and this many scholarships are going to the portal kids? Is that how it works?
So I think for most programs, what you're looking at is about a third turnover each year, right? So if you're dealing with 85, the easy number to work with, which is not perfect, but approximately 30 guys on your roster is going to turn over, right? And so what you've got to look at is, where do you have immediate needs? Well, immediate needs, you got to go to the portal for those immediate needs, unless it's a special high school football player. And then, okay, so how many immediate needs? Well, we need a starter at whatever, need key backups. So let's say that's either 10 or 12, and then you set your high school numbers based off that.
Yeah. And
then your high school numbers are still based on what's in your room. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the way we did it. I think that's the way most people are doing it. When you go through it, the only thing that I would tell you that's different and this is you used to be when it's just you're filling out your roster through high school recruiting, you would say, okay, hey, we're going to take 5 offensive linemen. Yeah. And man, here's the guys we have ranked. And if we get to a certain point, man, we'll just take the next best guy. Now what we did here, and I think this is the way a lot of people do it, is to say, okay, hey, all right, we want to take 5 offensive linemen. These are the 10 that we feel really good about helping us. And if we don't get one of those 10, you know what? We're just going to hit hold, and we'll try to find a developmental player in the portal that has 3 or 4 years rather than reaching on a high school player. Yeah. The problem with high school, and this is really, and I think it's unfair to high school coaches, because high school coaches now, if you're still living this, you're not only have to be responsible for wins and losses, but you're also, the parents have this it's really a belief that's unfounded and it's not backed, is that you're supposed to help them get into a scholarship. No. Right? Which right now for a high school player, it's harder than it ever has been. And because not only do you have portal guys that are taking these scholarships, a lot of places are reducing their number of scholarships. Now you have this junior college rule all of a sudden that the guys this year are going to have junior college. Yeah. You're just now having these guys that are finished off the COVID year where they're playing 6 and 7 years of college football. And there's a lot of Division II programs that have dropped football recently, and several junior colleges have dropped scholarship football. And so there's never been a tougher time to earn a scholarship at the high school level, because from the college coaching perspective, what are you looking for? You want experienced production, right? Yeah. Well, it's easier to get experienced production from a transfer guy than projecting that in a high school player.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I've tried to communicate with our parents, sort of a mindset of, my job is to work like crazy to get an evaluation. And after that, it'll come down to their video. And, where we're just now building, that hasn't been too big of an issue. But one thing I've really tried to do is when we have had some guys get offers off of a tough season, and just try to really help everybody understand in this climate with as you said, the JUCO, the transfer portal. And if you got multiple offers to play college football, that's a pretty good situation for a high school kid right now. So we're thankful for that. Neal, you've been super, and there are great things ahead for you. And hey, thanks for taking time for us today. You've been excellent.
Yep.
No, I appreciate it, and hopefully we can make some time to do this again. But appreciate you all, and appreciate what you're doing. Y'all have a great day.
Neal. Appreciate it, buddy.
Hey, great, Neal. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, that was excellent.
It really was.
It really was. Yeah. He did a great
was
job.
A wealth of information.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing these little things where we're breaking it up, because we've got a lot of clips from him that it'll be really good standing on its own. So it's good stuff. But anyway, hey, so let's keep on going. Discussing the biggest coaching move changes for 2025. What do you got? What do you think?
Oh, I think that so far you got Steve Stonebreaker to Danville. Steve has been. I think Steve is an excellent coach. I think he's a very, very good coach, and one of the better coaches around. He was at Casey. He's had success everywhere he's been. Casey, I think a couple of times. He's been at Garrett, been at Adair. He was even at my old high school, J-Town, Jeffersontown High School. But this is really, in my opinion, Steve's first shot at a state championship DNA program. Danville is a state championship. They got that state championship DNA. They do. I know they've been not very good, really horrible the last couple of years, but regardless, they've got some DNA in their program that's championship level. I'm anxious to see how it works out for him. I'm a fan of his. I think he'll do a great job there. I think he's an excellent football coach. And of course, Adrian Morton was one of our guests on here, and he did a great things at Ballard, and then kind of disappeared for a year, and now he's back in on the scene with Eastern High School in Louisville and Middletown. Man, they hit a home run with him. I don't know how they got him to come out of retirement or whatever he was on, but he's a great coach, and I think he'll do an excellent job at Eastern. And then Philip Hawkins, who was at Bryan Station, had done a great job at Bryan Station. He was at Apollo before that. He was one of our guests as well. And Coach Hawkins is gone to Henry Clay, and he switched to Henry Clay, which was a surprise to a lot of people, in the state of Kentucky. Home run hire for Henry Clay. I mean, they couldn't have done any better. And then the other job that was really interesting that just turned over was Oldham County. Oldham County hired Jamie Reed, and Jamie, was at South Oldham. He was in the crosstown rival, so that's really going to be interesting how that turns out. But glad to have him back in the coaching ranks. He does a great job. Did a great job at South Oldham, and he's going to make South Oldham a better football program. It's really interesting, David. There's 25 job openings in Kentucky. 25 job openings. Now, there's only 220 football playing schools and 25 head coaching jobs. There's a couple of big jobs still open that hadn't been filled. To my knowledge, Owensboro, Henderson County, Glasgow, there are some big-time jobs that still haven't been filled yet.
Yeah, I agree. And you did a good job running those down. I'm going to talk a little bit about I think an excellent hire, but one that also somewhat fascinating to me is Coach J.T. Haskins at Bryan Station. And the reason that got my interest a little bit is because he's going back to his old high school, and I got to go back and coach in my hometown, even though it was a merge. It wasn't the exact same high school. And I think when you go back to your hometown, I think it is a great experience and an opportunity, but I think it's tough also.
Very tough.
I really do. I think it is tough going back somewhere where you grew up, and I think he's going to do a really good job, and I've got a lot of respect for him. I tell you, somebody that I think probably ought to write a book on coaching in your hometown is Chris McNamee at Pikeville. Chris has just absolutely killed it at Pikeville High School and has done a great job there. But, I think Coach Haskins will do a really good job, but I will be curious to see how it plays out. As I said, I love my 7 years at Mercer County. I did. But coaching in your hometown's a tough gig, and I think he'll do great, but I wish him the best. So, are you ready? Go
David, now this is part right here that Matt could cut out, but should we go ahead and do we're at 1 hour and 6 minutes right now. Do we want to go ahead and do the tough topic and then?
Hey, let's save it. That's a good point. Let's save it.
Okay, so we can come back and wrap it. We'll wrap it up, and Matt can cut that out right there if he wants to. Are you all right with that, or do you want to?
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a real good idea.
All right, and so just to get back on track here, I think there is a time that we need to sit back and think about how lucky we are, because one of our fellow coaches in the state of Kentucky, Philip Haywood, was in an accident and hasn't, and I think he's got some good reports, but it's a pretty serious accident. And, he was a great person, one of our guests on here. And, we send out some prayers to Coach Philip Haywood.
Absolutely. And I can tell you when that all came about on Saturday, there were a lot of people reaching out, and a lot of people, wanted to check on Coach. So Coach is in our prayers, and we're very thankful to have one of the biggest high school football coaching legend in the United States is a Kentucky guy, and we're thankful that's Philip Haywood.
And we appreciate all the listeners. I think you got a lot out of tonight's show with Neal Brown. Neal was just absolutely fantastic. I think a lot of Neal, he's just done a tremendous job. And if you listen to his interview and his answers, you know why he's had so much success at an early age. He's done a great job. Appreciate the listeners turning in. You got anything for our next off season, David?
Yes. Our next guest is going to be on Thursday, February the 6th. It will be Coach Chris Fisher, who, if you're on Twitter, does the Texas High School Football Chat Twitter link, and he's got that going. It's a pretty cool thing he's got going on. But he's going to be our guest in February, and we're excited to have him. And I would want to encourage our listeners. At this point, we got 3 seasons. We've got 2 off seasons in. just like you brought up Coach Haywood. Man, we've had some great guests. Coach Stonebreaker has been a guest. Coach Hawkins has been a guest. And I hope I have some listeners go back and check out some old episodes. And I think you'll really learn from them. And, we're going to try to keep sharing things on YouTube where we cut it down by topics and get it a little more focused. So hope you'll be back with us on Thursday, February 6th. And, I know we've said it and I want to reemphasize it. We're working really hard to do a great job for our listeners. We know that you all are the one that makes this go, and we want it to be exactly what you're looking for.
Yes, and please stay tuned and listen to Mac's historical segment. You'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. Thanks for tuning in.
Sports, and in particular high school sports, are woven into the fabric of Americana. High school sports are part of the DNA of communities across the country, and that is certainly true in Kentucky. Fans know the stories of the big names, but there are many names and many stories that have been lost to history. This series highlights those forgotten heroes. Our story takes place August 29th, 1975. That was the date that changed Kentucky high school football. Breathitt County had a new first-year head coach by the name of Dudley Hilton. And an hour away at Prestonsburg, they had turned to their native son and Tates Creek assistant, Philip Haywood, to take over the Black Cat program. On that August night in 1975, the two future coaching icons squared off at Prestonsburg. 2 William Goebel touchdowns led the Black Cats to a 20-6 win over Breathitt County. The first win in a career for Philip Haywood that has seen him win 490 games, appear in 14 state title games, and win 8 state titles. It would take Dudley Hilton a few more games to get that first win. He got that first win in an 18-12 win over East Carter in the 8th game of the season. That win over East Carter was the first of his 443 wins. And of course, he's had 5 appearances in the state title, and he's won 3 of them. Now, I'm not sure what the attendance was in Prestonsburg on August 29, 1975, but I'm betting that over the years, as Philip Haywood and Dudley Hilton became the 2 all-time winningest coaches in state history, a lot of people swear they were at that game. Oh, and that coaching class of 1975 went on to make 45 appearances in state title games, and they won 24 state titles. Is it the most consequential and influential year in Kentucky high school football? Who knows? But that ripple effect from 1975 is still going strong today.